The lecture hall was filled with nervous energy as students from 17 different species found their seats. Jake Martinez sat near the back, with his datapad open to a message from his sister back on Earth. Around him, his classmates whispered anxiously, creating a symphony of clicks and whistles and melodic tones that filled the air with tension. Velra leaned toward him with her crystalline eyes wide and her forearms fidgeting nervously with her tablet. She was a Quilnari student with an insect-like body covered in pale blue chitin. Her antennae were flattening against her head in obvious distress. Jake had learned this meant she was worried about something serious. Professor Then is bringing in an actual predator today. They had to get special containment clearance from the Station Security Council. Velra whispered to Jake as her mandibles clicked softly. Jake glanced up from his messages with mild interest. "Oh yeah, and what kind of predator are we talking about?" "A Zenthari hunter." Velra's voice dropped even lower, as if saying the name too loudly might summon the creature. "They are from a 0.9 gravity world, so do you understand what that means? Their muscle density is 3 times ours, and one of them killed 17 people in a shipping station before being subdued." Jake set his datapad aside and nodded thoughtfully. "That does sound pretty intense, I guess." Velra stared at him with all her eyes showing disbelief. "Intense is what you call it. Jake, this creature could tear through most species here like we are made of paper. Professor Then assured us there would be 5 layers of containment and a full security team. But still, I am only here because attendance is mandatory." Around them, other students shared similar concerns and fears. A pair of Delphine students with blue skin that had gone pale with worry clutched each other's webbed hands tightly. Even the usually stoic Kronar students, who were reptilian beings from a low-gravity moon, looked tense and ready to bolt from the room at any moment. Professor Then entered through the main doors with his feathered crest raised high in what Jake recognized as his teaching mode posture. The Caraxian professor's sharp eyes scanned the room carefully, and his beak clicked once for attention. The room fell silent immediately. "Students, please settle yourselves because today we have an extraordinary learning opportunity." His wings spread slightly as he gestured to the reinforced door behind the lecture platform. "As you know, the galaxy is vast and filled with species whose capabilities far exceed what many of you have experienced in your homeworld's safe environments, and today you will witness firsthand why proper threat assessment and protocol adherence can save your lives in diplomatic or exploratory situations." A collective shudder ran through the classroom like a wave. Jake noticed several students had moved their seats back as far as physically possible from the front of the room. Behind this door is Crix, who is a Zenthari convicted of multiple counts of aggravated assault and manslaughter. Professor Then continued in his measured tone. Crix has agreed to participate in this educational demonstration in exchange for a reduction in containment level at his penal facility, and he will be behind 5 layers of energy shielding monitored by security personnel and wearing neural dampeners. "So you are completely safe," Velra muttered under her breath to Jake. "Completely safe seems optimistic, if you ask me, Professor." Then tapped a control panel and the wall behind him became transparent, revealing a massive containment chamber.
Jake leaned forward with genuine interest now.
The chamber was impressive to look at, with multiple glowing energy barriers, and each one hummed with visible power. Security personnel in heavy armor stood at attention with weapons trained on the center of the chamber. "Before I bring our subject into view, I want you to remember this feeling," Professor Then said softly, but his voice carried through the silent room. "Remember your fear and your awareness of danger, because this is the proper response to a genuine threat, and this response is what keeps you alive when facing the unknown." He pressed another control with deliberate slowness. The inner chamber. Lights brightened, gradually revealing the creature within. Crix the Zenthari stood in the center of the containment field, and his body was covered in dark chitinous plating that gleamed under the bright lights. He stood on 4 powerful legs, and each one ended in clawed feet that scraped against the metal floor with an unsettling sound. His torso was upright, almost like a centaur, with forearms ending in wicked-looking claws. His head was angular, with multiple eyes that glowed a faint red and a mouth that revealed rows of serrated teeth. The classroom erupted in gasps and frightened chirps and whistles. Several students physically pushed their desks backward with scraping sounds. One Delphine student let out a high-pitched whistle of pure terror that made others flinch. Velra's grip on her desk was so tight that Jake could hear the material creaking under the pressure. By the ancestors, she breathed in barely more than a whisper. Crix moved slowly and his powerful muscles rippled beneath his armor plating. Even dampened by restraints and separated by 5 energy barriers, his presence was menacing and filled the room with dread. He turned his head slowly, surveying the students, with those glowing red eyes, and his mouth opened to reveal even more teeth than before. Then Jake laughed. It was not a nervous laugh or a cough disguised as amusement. It was a genuine surprised chuckle that echoed in the suddenly silent room like a thunderclap. Every head turned toward him instantly. Velra looked at him like he had grown a second head. "Professor?" Then's crest flattened in complete confusion. "Mr. Martinez," the professor asked very carefully. Jake cleared his throat and tried to compose himself, but another chuckle escaped despite his efforts. Sorry, it's just that," he looked at Crix again and had to suppress another laugh. "That's the dangerous predator everyone is so scared of." The silence that followed was absolute and heavy. Even Crix seemed to pause in his movements, and his multiple eyes focused on the human who had just laughed at him. Professor Then's beak opened and closed twice before he found words. "Mr. Martinez, I assure you this is no laughing matter at all, because Crix is extremely dangerous, and he has killed 17 beings. Yeah, I heard about the 17 people." Jake stood up and moved closer to get a better look, which made Velra grab at his arm in panic. "I'm not trying to be disrespectful, Professor, but that's supposed to be scary to everyone here. He's what, maybe 7 feet tall or 8 feet at most, and those claws are..." He held up his hand, measuring, with his fingers about, 3 inches long, or maybe 4 inches maximum. The classroom erupted in shocked whispers and urgent conversations. Velra pulled at Jake's arm desperately. "Jake, please sit down right now, because what are you doing?" Professor Then's feathers ruffled in clear agitation. "Mr. Martinez, this creature is from a .9 gravity world, so his strength is far beyond what you might imagine. Is probably impressive by your standards, sure, I'll give you that." Jake shrugged while still studying Crix with curious interest rather than any fear. "Look, I'm not saying he couldn't hurt someone, because obviously he did hurt people, but dangerous enough to need 5 layers of containment and all this security. This is what you needed all that for, really?" Crix himself seemed offended now, and his claws flexed as he moved toward the barrier as close to Jake as the containment would allow. He let out a sound that was probably meant to be intimidating, which was a cross between a growl and a hiss that made several students whimper. Jake waved casually at the creature. "Hey there, buddy, nice to meet you." Velra made a sound like a kettle boiling over. "Jake, please stop antagonizing the murder machine right now." Professor Then was struggling to maintain his composure and teaching authority. "Mr. Martinez, I think you are failing to grasp the severity of this situation. Professor, with all respect, I think you're failing to grasp human standards." Jake turned back to face the class with confidence. "Earth is a Class 12 death world, and I grew up in Colorado, which is in the mountains. You know what we worried about on the way to school every single day?" He ticked off on his fingers as he spoke. "Mountain lions, which are predators that can be 8 feet long with 4-inch claws and teeth that can crush bone easily. They can leap 40 feet horizontally and climb trees, and they're ambush hunters who can take down prey twice their size completely silently." Several students looked physically ill at this description. Jake continued without noticing their distress. "Then there were bears, and specifically grizzly bears can weigh 800 pounds of pure muscle and stand 10 feet tall and run 30 miles per hour and have 5-inch claws designed for ripping things apart. They can bite through cast iron and flip over boulders that weigh hundreds of pounds like they're nothing." "Please stop talking," Velra whispered desperately. "Oh, and moose, which people think are harmless because they're herbivores, but they kill more people in North America than bears and mountain lions combined. They're massive and aggressive and can stomp you into paste if they feel like it." Jake looked back at Crix, who was still trying to look menacing behind his barriers. "So yeah, sorry Crix, but you're reading more like a large dog than an apex predator. On my threat assessment scale, and maybe a wolf if I'm being generous with the comparison." The Xanthari let out a roar that shook the containment field violently. The security personnel tensed immediately with weapons raised and ready. Jake just smiled and sat back down calmly. Professor Then's office was modest by human standards, but spacious for most Galactic Academy faculty members. Jake sat in a specially reinforced chair, which was one of the few pieces of furniture on the station rated for human weight. The professor paced back and forth with his taloned feet clicking on the metal floor in a rhythm that showed his agitation. In 30 years of teaching xenobiology, I have never had a student laugh at a live threat demonstration, Professor Then said while his crest feathers twitched with obvious irritation. Do you understand the position this puts me in, Mr. Martinez? I really am sorry, Professor, because I wasn't trying to undermine your lesson at all. Jake leaned forward with genuine apologetic expression on his face. It was just such a shock to see everyone so scared of something that, from my perspective, wasn't that threatening, to be honest. Professor Then stopped pacing and fixed Jake with his sharp avian gaze. Wasn't that threatening, he repeated slowly as if testing the words. Jake, let me make something clear, because Crix killed 17 beings and he tore through a secured facility, and station security required stunners and nets and a full tactical team to subdue him. So how is that not threatening? Jake considered his words carefully before speaking. Okay, so here's the thing. And on Earth, particularly where I grew up, we have something called wildlife awareness, which is just part of everyday life. You learn what's dangerous and what's not dangerous, and how to avoid problems and how to react if something goes wrong. He pulled out his data pad and brought up an image of a large cat. This is a mountain lion, which we also call a cougar or puma. A big cat that lives in the area where I grew up, and every year a few people get attacked by them. Some people die from those attacks, but we don't build 5-layer containment facilities to show kids what they look like. We just teach kids how to avoid them and what to do if they encounter one. Professor Then studied the image and his pupils dilated with concern. This creature hunts humans as prey. Sometimes it does hunt humans. Jake swiped to another image. Usually they avoid us completely, but if one's hungry or protecting cubs, then yeah, it might attack. He showed another picture. This is a grizzly bear, which is more dangerous than mountain lions. This is a wolf pack. This is a crocodile. This is a hippopotamus, and people think they're harmless because they're herbivores, but they kill more people in Africa than lions do every year. With each image, Professor Then's feathers ruffled more and more. These all exist on your world in the areas where you actually live. Well, hippos and crocodiles are more in Africa and other warm places, but bears and mountain lions and wolves and coyotes and venomous snakes and spiders, yeah, all around where I grew up. Jake shrugged casually. My mom made me take a wilderness safety course when I was 8 years old. You learn to make noise while hiking so you don't surprise a bear, and how to tell if a snake is venomous, and what to do if you encounter a mountain lion in the wild. What do you do if you encounter a mountain lion? Professor Then asked while sitting down heavily in his own chair. You make yourself look big, and you don't run away, and you maintain eye contact and back away slowly. Jake said this as casually as someone might describe how to cross a street safely. If it attacks, you fight back with everything you have. Don't play dead, because that's for bears in certain situations. Professor Then was quiet for a long moment while processing this information. And all human children learn these survival skills. Where I'm from, yeah, they do. Jake nodded. It varies by region, obviously. Kids in Australia learn about different stuff like venomous spiders and snakes and jellyfish and crocodiles and cassowaries, which are dangerous birds. Please stop listing nightmare creatures from your world. Professor Then held up a wing to stop him. I am beginning to understand why the Galactic Council was so hesitant to approve human integration into the Academy program initially. Jake felt a pang of guilt hit him. Is this going to be a problem for me or for other human students? I really didn't mean to cause trouble for anyone. Trouble? No, this is not trouble. Professor Then's beak clicked thoughtfully. Revelation, yes, this is definitely revelation. Jake, do you know why most species are afraid of Crix the way they are? Because he killed people, I assume. Partially, yes, but more because he represents something beyond their normal experience. Professor Then explained patiently. Most civilized species in the galaxy come from what you would classify as gentle worlds. My own people, the Caraxians, evolved on a low-gravity world with very few predators. The most dangerous creature on my home world was a bird slightly larger than myself that ate fish from the lakes. Professor Then pulled up a holographic display showing various planets in the galaxy. When species develop space travel, they encounter new dangers. Yes, this is true, but they do so carefully with extensive protocols and precautions in place. The idea of growing up surrounded by creatures that could kill you and learning to live alongside them is a normal part of childhood. He shook his head slowly. This is incomprehensible to most of us in the galaxy. But you knew Earth was dangerous when you accepted human students, right? Jake asked with concern. We knew the classification, which is Class 12 Deathworld. Professor Then looked at Jake intently. High gravity and extreme weather and dangerous fauna and flora and significant tectonic activity and atmospheric volatility. What we did not fully understand was what it meant to be shaped by such a world, the psychological impact it has, the casual acceptance of danger, the recalibration of threat assessment that happens naturally. Jake scratched his head thoughtfully. When you put it that way, I guess it does sound kind of intense. Intense, Professor Then repeated with what might have been amusement in his voice. Jake, your planet has insects that can kill a grown adult with a single sting. You have weather patterns that regularly produce winds capable of demolishing structures. Your oceans contain creatures that can swallow small vehicles whole. And your response to all this danger is to go camping for recreation and fun. Camping is fun, though, Jake protested with a smile. You deliberately go into the wilderness where the dangerous creatures live, and you do this for fun and relaxation. Well, yeah, we do. Jake nodded. I mean, you take precautions, obviously. You're careful about what you do. But nature is beautiful, and it's worth the risk to experience it. He smiled while remembering his last camping trip. There's nothing like sitting around a campfire under the stars and listening to wolves howl in the distance at night. Professor Then stood abruptly with a decision made. Come with me, because there is someone you need to meet right now. They walked through the station's corridors together while passing students of various species who gave Jake a much wider berth than usual. Word of the incident in class had clearly spread throughout the entire station already. Velra waved tentatively from across a junction, but her antennae were still flat with nervousness. Professor then led Jake to a secure section of the station, and they went through multiple checkpoints where guards scrutinized them both very carefully. Finally, they entered a conference room where 3 individuals waited for them. Professor Then, a tall, slender being covered in silver scales, said formally, "This is the human student we have heard about. Ambassador Kelvin, may I introduce Jake Martinez, who is one of our human exchange students." Professor Then gestured to Jake. "Jake, this is Ambassador
Kelvin of the Galactic Council's Integration.
Committee and Commander Erix of Station Security, and Dr. Helena of the Xenopsychology Department." Jake shook hands, or the equivalent with each of them, while noting how carefully they approached him as though he might suddenly become violent without warning. "Mr. Martinez," Ambassador Kelvin said smoothly, "we have heard interesting reports about today's incident in Professor Then's xenobiology class. I really am sorry about laughing at Crix," Jake said quickly, wanting to apologize. "I didn't mean any disrespect to him or to the professor's lesson. Crix is not offended at all," Commander Erix interrupted. The security commander was a Kronar, which was a large reptilian species, but even he seemed cautious around Jake. "He is, however, confused about your reaction, and he has been told he will be speaking with you shortly." "Speaking with me, and why would he want that?" Jake asked with surprise. Dr. Helena leaned forward with interest. She was a Kilnari like Velra, but older, and with more elaborate markings on her exoskeleton. "Mr. Martinez, your reaction today has prompted an urgent review of our integration protocols. We need to understand human psychology better than we currently do. The fact that you found Crix unintimidating while every other student was appropriately terrified suggests we have significantly misunderstood what humans consider dangerous." Ambassador Kelvin pulled up a holographic display showing multiple incident reports. "We have incident reports from other stations where humans are stationed throughout the galaxy. A human engineer on Trade Station 7 reportedly remained calm during a reactor breach that had the entire station evacuating in panic, while stating the radiation levels were not that bad. A human medical officer on the exploration vessel, Wanderer, treated a wounded Drax warrior without requesting backup or restraints, even though that species is known for berserker rage when injured. A human civilian on Colony World Praxis," Commander Erix added to the list, "was found keeping a juvenile Scaran as a pet in his quarters. Scarans are classified as..." The containment facility was significantly more intimidating than a classroom setting could ever be. Jake followed Commander Erix through multiple security checkpoints, and each one required biometric scans and authorization codes. The walls were thick reinforced alloy, and the air had the sterile quality of a place designed to contain things that should not escape under any circumstances. "Last chance to reconsider this meeting," Commander Erix said as they approached the final door. "Crix is restrained, and we will have weapons trained on him at all times, but if something goes wrong during your conversation, it won't go wrong.
Jake said with a confidence he genuinely felt.
But I appreciate the concern, Commander. The Kronar security chief shook his scaled head slowly. Dr. Helena believes your inability to properly assess danger is a neurological adaptation. Professor Then thinks it is cultural conditioning from your upbringing. I think you are simply insane. Jake laughed at this assessment. Maybe all three explanations are correct. They entered a room divided by a transparent barrier that hummed with energy. On one side was a simple setup with a table and 2 chairs. On the other side, Crick sat in a much more elaborate restraint system. The Xanthari's forearms were locked in position and his legs were secured to the floor and a neural dampener. Collar glowed around his neck with a soft blue light. He looked completely miserable in his restraints. Cricks, Commander Erich said formally. This is Jake Martinez, who is the human who requested this meeting with you. You understand the terms clearly. Any threatening behavior ends this immediately and you return to full containment. Cricks's multiple eyes focused on Jake and his mandibles clicked softly. I understand the terms completely. Good. Commander Erich stepped back to a monitoring station where 2 other guards watched with weapons ready. Mr. Martinez, you have 30 minutes for this conversation. Jake walked up to the barrier and sat in the chair while studying Cricks carefully. The Xanthari studied him right back with equal intensity. Up close, Jake could see the scars on Cricks's chitinous armor and the weariness in his glowing eyes. So I owe you an apology, Jake said, breaking the silence. Laughing at you in class was disrespectful to you. I'm sorry for that. Cricks tilted his head in what might have been surprise. You are apologizing to me when I am a convicted murderer. You're also a person, and I was rude to you, Jake said simply. The 2 things aren't mutually exclusive. For what it's worth, I wasn't laughing because I think killing 17 people is funny. I was laughing because everyone was so scared of you, and from my perspective, you just didn't register as that scary. Yes, Professor Then explained this to me. Cricks's mandibles clicked in what Jake was learning to recognize as thoughtfulness. He showed me images of Earth's fauna and your world as he paused, searching for words. Terrifying to imagine living on. Most people who live there don't think of it as terrifying, Jake explained. It's just home to us. That is what I do not understand at all, Crick said while leaning forward as much as his restraints allowed. How do you function normally? How do your young survive to adulthood? On my world, the most dangerous creature was the Sky Reaver, and they only hunted once every 3 seasons. Your world has hundreds of apex predators, and you simply live among them like it's normal. Jake considered how to explain this properly. It's all about context, I guess. Yeah, we have dangerous animals, but they're not everywhere all the time. You learn the patterns of behavior. Mountain lions are mostly active at dawn and dusk. Rattlesnakes give you a warning before they strike. Bears usually avoid humans unless surprised or protecting cubs. But they can kill you easily, sure they can. Jake nodded. So can cars and lightning and falling downstairs and eating the wrong mushroom. Life has risks no matter what. You just learn to manage them properly. He smiled. My grandmother used to say that if you spent your whole life being afraid of what might happen, then you'd never actually live. Cricks was quiet for a moment while thinking. On my world, we have a saying that goes like this. Only fools ignore the predator's shadow. It means that wisdom comes from recognizing danger and avoiding it completely. That's not foolish at all, Jake agreed. That's smart advice. But on Earth, if you avoided everything dangerous, you'd never leave your house. And even then, houses have risks like fires and structural failures and carbon monoxide poisoning. He saw Cricks's eyes widen and stopped himself. Sorry, I'm probably not helping the humans or crazy perception. No, you are not helping that perception, Crick said, but there was something like humor in his voice. Tell me, human Jake, what do your people do for what is the word I am looking for? Recreation. Oh, lots of things, Jake replied. Sports and art and music and reading. Some people like extreme sports, which means jumping out of aircraft and climbing sheer rock faces and diving to extreme depths underwater. They do these things voluntarily for fun. Yeah, it's fun for them, Jake shrugged. Well, for some people anyway. I'm more of a hiking and camping person myself. Camping. Cricks repeated the word carefully. This is where you go into the wilderness and sleep on the ground where predators can find you. We usually use tents for protection, Jake explained. And like I said before, most predators avoid humans, most predators. Cricks's mandibles clicked rapidly, which Jake was beginning to think was laughter. Human Jake, your species is truly bizarre. But I think I am beginning to understand something important. What's that? Why you laughed at me in that classroom. Crix shifted in his restraints as much as he could, and his multiple eyes reflected the harsh lighting. To you, I am not an apex predator. I am merely another creature sharing your space. The way you view the world, it is not about dominance or submission or fear or power. It is about coexistence with everything around you. Jake blinked in surprise at the insight. That's actually a really good way to put it. Yeah, we don't see ourselves as separate from nature or above it. We're part of it. Does that make sense to you? More sense than you might think. Crix looked away, and for a moment he seemed vulnerable despite his fearsome appearance. My crimes, they were defensive in nature. Ships from other species kept encroaching on Xanthari territory and treating us like monsters to be contained or avoided. When they tried to force us into restricted zones, I fought back. Too hard. I did not understand that to them I was the terrifying predator, and to them you probably couldn't understand why they were so afraid. Exactly right. Crix looked back at Jake. Human Jake, may I ask you something personal? Sure, go ahead. If I were not restrained like this, and if we were meeting in a neutral place, would you truly not fear me at all? Jake thought about it honestly before answering. I'd be cautious. You're bigger than me and stronger, and you have natural weapons I don't have. But scared, no, not really. Not unless you gave me a reason to be scared. Fear is expensive energy-wise. You can't go through life afraid of everything that could hurt you. You'd exhaust yourself mentally and physically. Expensive. Crix's mandibles clicked again. That is a very practical way to view survival. Earth taught us to be practical, Jake said. We don't have much choice about it. They sat in companionable silence for a moment. Then Crix spoke again, but softer this time. The other species, they will never understand us, will they? The Xanthari and the humans, we are too different from their experience. They might not understand completely, Jake admitted, but they can learn. That's why I'm doing these interviews and evaluations. The more they understand about how we think and why we react the way we do, the better everyone can work together. A noble goal to have. Maybe? Jake grinned. Or maybe I just don't want my classmates to be scared of me for the rest of my time at the academy. Velra already treats me like I might suddenly snap and go feral. It's getting awkward. Crix's entire body shook in what was definitely laughter. Your friend Velra came to see me yesterday, did you know that? She did, and why? Yes, she came. Crix's eyes softened. She wanted to understand why I killed those people. She asked if I could teach her to not be afraid anymore. He paused. I told her fear is natural and healthy. It keeps you alive. But she said she did not want to fear her friend, and that she needed to understand you to do that. Jake felt warmth in his chest. She said that about me, she did? Crix nodded slowly. Your species may be bizarre, human Jake, but your capacity for friendship is not. This at least we all share. A chime indicated their time was nearly up. Commander Erix approached the barrier. 5 more minutes, Mr. Martinez. Jake nodded and turned back to Crix. Listen, I know you're in here for a while, but once these interviews and studies are done, I'm going to recommend they bring you into the education program properly, not as a threat to scare students, but as a teacher. You have valuable perspective on cross-species understanding. Crix's eyes widened in surprise. They would never allow that to happen. Maybe not right away, Jake said, but I can be persuasive, or annoying, whichever works better. Dr. Helena's laboratory was a strange blend of clinical precision and organic chaos. Holographic displays floated in midair showing brain scans and psychological profiles and stress response charts. Along one wall, terrariums housed various small creatures from different worlds, and all were part of her comparative behavioral studies. Jake sat in what looked like a dentist's chair from a science fiction movie with sensors attached to his temples and wrists and chest. Dr. Helena's forearms moved independently while adjusting equipment and making notes on a floating datapad. Comfortable, Mr. Martinez? She asked, with her antennae twitching with what he'd learned was excited focus. As comfortable as someone can be wired up like a piece of test equipment, Jake replied good-naturedly. So what's first on the agenda today? We are going to map your stress responses to various stimuli. Dr. Helena pulled up a holographic display. I will show you images and videos of creatures from different worlds, and we will measure your physiological reactions. Heart rate and cortisol levels and neural activity and pupil dilation, all the markers of fear and stress response. Sounds straightforward enough. For most species it is. Dr. Helena's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement or concern. For humans, I honestly do not know what to expect. The first series of images began to display. A Coraxian night stalker appeared, which was a bird of prey from Professor Then's homeworld, with a 6-foot wingspan and razor-sharp talons. Jake's sensors barely flickered at the image. "Pretty bird," he commented casually. "Reminds me of a golden eagle." Dr. Helena made a note on her datapad. "On my homeworld, night stalkers are considered apex predators. On Earth, people keep eagles for falconry." Jake said simply, "Of course they do." Dr. Helena muttered while typing. The images continued one after another. A delphine ocean stalker, which was an aquatic predator with rows of crystalline teeth. A chronar sandworm, which was a burrowing creature 20 feet long with acid saliva. A swarm of quilnari stingwings, which were insects that could strip flesh from bone in minutes. Jake's sensors remained mostly calm throughout. He found some images interesting and others mildly concerning, but none triggered a significant fear response. Then Dr. Helena showed him an image of a tiny fuzzy creature with large eyes and soft-looking fur. It was about the size of a tennis ball and looked like it could fit in his palm. Jake's sensors went completely wild. "Whoa, what is that thing?" he asked while leaning forward with obvious concern. Dr. Helena checked her readings and her antennae stood straight up in surprise. "That is a pixeling from Gentle World 741. It is completely harmless. It eats nectar, and Mr. Martinez, why are you showing signs of extreme stress?" "Because it's clearly designed to look cute and harmless, which means it's probably venomous or poisonous or something equally nasty," Jake explained. "Nature doesn't make things look that adorable unless it's a survival mechanism." He squinted at the image. "What's the catch? Does it spray acid? Inject neurotoxin, explode? It does none of those things," Dr. Helena said. "It is genuinely harmless." "Really?" Jake relaxed slightly. "Huh. So it just evolved to look cute for no reason. It evolved to look appealing to its pollinators." Dr. Helena was typing rapidly. "The cuteness, as you call it, is coincidental." She looked up at him. "This is fascinating. You are more suspicious of apparently harmless creatures than genuinely dangerous ones. On Earth, a lot of the deadliest things look harmless," Jake explained. "Poison dart frogs are tiny and colorful. Box jellyfish are almost invisible. That cute fuzzy caterpillar you see, touch it and you might need an ambulance. You learn not to trust appearances." Dr. Helena showed him another image, which was a human-made teddy bear. Jake's sensors calmed immediately. "That's just a stuffed toy, but it resembles the pixeling in many ways," Dr. Helena pointed out. "Similar proportions and similar features and similar cuteness. Why do you trust one and not the other?" "Because I know what a teddy bear is," Jake said. "Context matters. If I saw a real animal that looked exactly like a teddy bear, I'd be suspicious as hell." They continued through hundreds of images. Dr. Helena showed him creatures that terrified most species, and Jake remained calm. She showed him things that looked harmless, and his stress responses spiked. Finally, she pulled up a video of a garden on a human colony world. Just plants swaying gently in a breeze. Jake tensed immediately. "Are those plants from Earth?" "Yes." Dr. Helena watched him carefully. "Why? Are any of them moving more than they should be?" Jake asked while studying the video. "Like more than the wind would account for." Dr. Helena checked the video parameters. "No, this is a recorded video. Nothing is actually moving on its own. Because on Earth, if plants move on their own, that's usually bad news," Jake explained. "Could be snakes in the grass. Could be a predator hiding in the foliage. Could be the plants themselves, because we have plants that can cause severe chemical burns, and plants with thorns that inject toxins, and plants that can literally eat animals. Your planet has carnivorous plants, several species." Jake nodded. "Venus flytraps and pitcher plants and sundews. They're small, but yeah, they eat bugs and sometimes even small rodents." Dr. Helena sat down heavily with all 4 arms hanging limp. "Your people really do live on a nightmare world. We really don't think of it that way," Jake said gently. "Want to see pictures from my mom's garden? She grows roses and tomatoes and some really beautiful lilies. Are any of them poisonous? I mean, you shouldn't eat the lily bulbs, but they're mostly safe." "Mostly safe," Dr. Helena repeated, and her voice was faint. "That is the standard for human safety. Not completely safe, but mostly safe." They spent the next several hours running different tests. Reaction time studies showed Jake's reflexes were faster than average for humans, and this was likely due to growing up in Colorado, where quick reactions could mean the difference between safety and a snake bite. Pattern recognition tests showed Jake was extremely good at spotting camouflaged threats, but tended to see threats where none existed. Dr. Helena called this hypervigilant pattern matching risk assessment scenarios were particularly interesting. When presented with theoretical dangerous situations, Jake consistently rated them as less risky than alien participants did, but his proposed solutions were often more comprehensive and practical. You are better at managing danger than avoiding it. Dr. Helena observed, most species prioritize avoidance. Humans prioritize management and mitigation. Well, yeah, Jake said. If avoiding danger meant never going outside, that's not really living, is it? As the sun cycle shifted toward evening, which was artificial on the station but maintained for circadian rhythm purposes, Dr. Helena finally declared they had enough data for the initial analysis. Mr. Martinez, you have been very patient, she said while removing the sensors. Would you like to see some preliminary findings? Absolutely. She pulled up a comparative chart. This shows stress hormone responses across different species when exposed to the Crick's demonstration. As you can see, every species showed elevated cortisol levels and increased heart rate, and neural activity consistent with fear. Every species except humans. Jake's line on the chart was remarkably flat until the moment he laughed, where it showed a spike of amusement-related brain chemistry. And this, Dr. Helena continued while pulling up another chart, shows the reverse. When exposed to seemingly harmless stimuli, most species relax. Humans remain vigilant. Is that bad? Not bad, Dr. Helena said. Different. It suggests humans evolved in an environment where danger could come from any direction at any time, and from sources both obvious and hidden. This created a species that is simultaneously very difficult to frighten with overt threats and very alert to subtle potential dangers. She pulled up a brain scan comparison. Your amygdala, which is the fear center, is not smaller than other species. In fact, it is quite active. But your prefrontal cortex, which is the reasoning center, has much stronger connections to it. You do not feel less fear. You process it differently. You analyze it and categorize it and manage it, rather than letting it control your behavior. So we're not fearless, Jake said. We're just practical about fear. Exactly. Dr. Helena pulled up a document. And this has profound implications. Ambassador Kelvin wants to use these findings to revise first contact protocols and adjust risk assessment training and develop better integration programs for species from different environmental backgrounds. That's great, Jake said. Does this mean people will stop treating me like I'm going to spontaneously become violent? Possibly, Dr. Helena said. Though I should warn you that the data also confirms that humans are objectively more capable of violence than most species. Your muscle density and bone structure and nervous system are all optimized for a high-threat environment. You are by galactic standards quite dangerous. But I don't want to hurt anyone, I know. Dr. Helena met his eyes with her multiple orbs. And that is perhaps the most important finding of all. Humans have the capacity for violence but generally choose cooperation. You are dangerous but not aggressive. This combination is almost unique in the galaxy. Almost. The Xanthari share some similarities, though their evolutionary path was different. Dr. Helena explained, this is probably why you and Crix understood each other so quickly. You both come from worlds that taught you strength should be tempered with restraint. 3 months after Jake's interview with Crix, the entire atmosphere of Station Harmony had changed in subtle but significant ways. The changes weren't dramatic, with no policy overhauls or structural modifications, but the feeling in the air had shifted like a season, turning from winter to spring. Jake walked through the central plaza while noting how students no longer gave him such a wide berth. A group of Delphine students waved to him cheerfully from a cafe table. A Kronar engineering student actually asked him to join their study group for an upcoming exam. Even the station security guards had stopped watching him quite so intently whenever he passed. But the real surprise was waiting for him in Professor Then's classroom when he arrived for the afternoon lecture. Crix stood at the front of the lecture hall, and he was no longer behind 5 layers of containment. He wore a simple monitoring bracelet on one of his forearms and was flanked by a single security officer, but he was free to move and gesture and interact with the class directly. Jake. Professor, Then said with his crest feathers rising in greeting, you are right on time. We were just beginning today's discussion on cross-species communication and threat perception. Jake slid into his usual seat next to Velra, who had her tablet already open and was taking notes diligently. She'd been helping Dr. Helena compile data on human-alien interactions and had become something of an expert on human psychology. Over the past few months, Crix turned to face the class, and his multiple eyes scanned the students carefully. Most of them still looked nervous, but it was a manageable nervousness rather than the paralyzing fear from before. "Good afternoon, everyone," Crix said, and his voice carried the clicking undertones of his species but was clear and articulate. "I am Crix, and as you know, I am here because I made serious mistakes that cost innocent lives. I am not here to excuse those mistakes, but to help you understand how they happened." He gestured to a holographic display that appeared. "This is my homeworld, which is called Zenthar. As you can see, it is a 0.9 gravity world with a hostile environment. Extreme temperatures and predatory fauna and limited resources shaped my species into what humans would call survival specialists." A student raised their hand, and it was a Quilnari, whom Jake didn't know well. "But that does not excuse violence against others. No, it does not." Crix agreed immediately. "But it explains context. When other species first made contact with the Zenthari, they approached us with weapons visible and voices raised and making themselves appear large and threatening. To them, this was a show of strength and authority. To us, it was a clear declaration of hostile intent." Professor Then stepped forward to add to the explanation. "This is a crucial point. What one species interprets as caution, another might see as aggression. What seems like confidence to humans might read as suicidal recklessness to Quilnari. These misunderstandings can escalate quickly." They did escalate. Crix continued, and his voice was heavy with regret. "I interpreted defensive posturing as pre-combat positioning. When they tried to restrict my movement, I saw it as an attempt to trap me, so I defended myself with lethal force. By the time I realized my mistake, 17 beings were dead." The classroom was silent while students processed this information. Jake could see them connecting dots they hadn't seen before. "But here is what I have learned in these recent months," Crix said, and now he looked directly at Jake. "Understanding changes everything. When Jake Martinez laughed at me in this very room, my first reaction was rage. How dare this small creature dismiss me? But then I realized he was not dismissing me. He simply had a different calibration for danger." Jake felt dozens of eyes turned to him but kept his focus on Crix. "Jake comes from a world so dangerous that I, who am a creature you all fear, barely register as a threat to him." Crix continued. "But he did not mock me. He apologized. He spoke with me. He treated me as a person and not a monster. That is when I understood that my mistakes came from seeing other species as threats, rather than as people with different perspectives." Professor Then pulled up a new display showing various species' homeworlds. "This is the core of what we have been studying with Jake's help and Dr. Helena's research. Every species brings the lessons of their homeworld with them into space. Humans bring adaptability and risk management from Earth. Quilnari bring caution and community focus from their gentle world. Zenthari bring defensive awareness from their harsh environment. None of these perspectives are wrong," Crix added. "They are just different, and the galaxy works best when we understand these differences rather than fear them." For the next hour, the class discussed case studies of cross-species misunderstandings. A human colony ship that nearly started a war by making aggressive first contact with a species that valued submissive greeting postures. A Quilnari diplomatic mission that offended their hosts by showing too much fear. A Zenthari trader who was imprisoned for defensive reactions to what he perceived as threats. Each case study came with analysis and suggested alternative approaches. It was fascinating and practical and exactly the kind of education the galaxy needed. After class ended, Jake approached Crix while students filed out. Most of them actually said goodbye to the Zenthari, which was a significant improvement from 3 months ago. "That was a great lesson," Jake said honestly. "How are you adjusting to teaching? It is strange but fulfilling," Crix admitted. "I never imagined I would be allowed this opportunity. Your recommendation to Ambassador Kelvin made this possible." "You earned it," Jake said. "You've helped more people understand cross-species dynamics in 3 months than most diplomats do in years." "Perhaps." Crix tilted his head. "I hear you are leaving us soon." Jake nodded. "My exchange term is ending. I head back to Earth next week. Will you return?" "Definitely." Jake smiled. "I'm applying for a permanent position on the Integration Committee. Someone needs to be the bridge between humans and the rest of the galaxy, and apparently I'm qualified. More than qualified," Professor Then said while joining them. "Jake, I have something for you. Consider it a graduation gift." He handed Jake a small crystal data chip. This contains the compiled research from your time here. Dr. Helena's studies and my observations and testimony from hundreds of students and faculty. It is the most comprehensive analysis of human psychology and threat perception ever compiled. This is incredible, Professor, Jake said gratefully. Thank you. Thank us by using it well, Professor Then said. Humanity is still new to the galactic community. This research will help smooth your people's integration immensely. Velra appeared looking slightly out of breath. Jake, there you are. Come on, because everyone is waiting. Waiting for what? She grabbed his hand with one of her forearms and pulled him toward the door. You will see. Jake let himself be dragged through the station's corridors while followed by amused looks from Crix and Professor. Then they emerged into the central plaza, which had been decorated with banners representing dozens of different worlds, including Earth. At least 100 students were gathered there from every species represented at the academy. When they saw Jake, they began a coordinated greeting with each species using their own traditional gesture of respect and friendship. The Quilnari clicked their mandibles in harmony. The Caraxians spread their wings in salute. The Kronar struck their chests with closed fists. The Delphine students created a rippling wave pattern with their arms. Jake felt his throat tighten with emotion. Ambassador Kelvin stepped forward from the crowd. Jake Martinez, in your brief time at this station, you have done more to advance cross-species understanding than many diplomats accomplish in their entire careers. You faced fear with laughter, and met hostility with curiosity and turned potential conflict into friendship. He held up a medal which was a simple but elegant design showing multiple worlds orbiting a shared sun. On behalf of the Galactic Council's Integration Committee, I award you the Star of Unity, which is given to those who build bridges between worlds. As Kelvin placed the medal around Jake's neck, the crowd erupted in applause and cheers and species-specific sounds of celebration. Jake saw Dr. Helena dabbing at her eyes with one of her arms and Professor Then's crest feathers standing proud, and Tall and Crick standing at the back of the crowd with what could only be described as a smile. Velra hugged him tightly. You did it, Jake. You made them understand. We all did it, Jake corrected. I just showed up and was myself. You and Dr. Helena and Professor Then and Crix, everyone here did the real work. The celebration continued, with food from dozens of worlds and music that blended alien instruments into something uniquely beautiful, and conversations that mixed languages and gestures into a universal language of friendship. Later that evening, Jake found himself on one of the station's observation decks looking out at the stars. Crix joined him while moving with surprising quiet for his size. Thinking about home, Crix asked. Yeah, Jake nodded, but also thinking about how home feels different now. Earth will always be home, but this place and these people are part of me now too. That is the gift of understanding, Crix said softly. It expands your world. Before I met you, Jake Martinez, I thought my world was violence and survival. Now I know it can be teaching and learning and connection. The transport ship Earth bound departed exactly 1 week later, and Jake stood at the viewport watching Station Harmony grow smaller in the distance until it was just a